Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. We're going to do a follow-up here on a story I've covered in the past. It's not just a follow-up, it's more an escalation as well. There are plans by the SNP government to basically get rid of jury trials for certain crimes, specifically anything that involves the R of a woman. I have to use that term. YouTube does not like the word, that it is associated with. Especially not early in a video. So this specific crime would be, subjected to a non-jury trial, and of course all the legal profession, from solicitors, KCs, even judges, are totally against this. They say it removes justice because you end up with the situation, as I've covered before, you end up with the situation where the establishment will arrest you, the establishment will charge you, then the establishment will try you, and it is the establishment that say whether you're innocent or guilty. There are no safeguards. There's no public involved. You're not presenting a case to 12 people who, or in Scotland's case, 15 people who will find out whether you're innocent or guilty based on the evidence. This is purely decided by a judge himself, but the judges have quotas and they have to find so many people guilty, and if they don't find enough people guilty, the judge loses his job. Now that straight away indicates that there will be people tried and found guilty who are not guilty, but simply found guilty because the judge has to make up the numbers, has to hit his quota. This obviously is not justice, and of course all the lawyers in Scotland, and not just the lawyers, the KCs, even the judges, are totally against this, because it's debasing justice. But the SNP still have their plans. They want to go ahead, and they're looking at maybe imposing this rather than offering the defendants the option of having a juryless trial. But previously, the lawyers said they will not do this. They will not, push their clients into a juryless trial. So effectively, the scheme you'd think was dead. But now, of course, the SNP are thinking of bringing it in regardless of the wishes of the client or the wishes of the lawyer. And so the lawyers have stood up, and to a man they have rejected this, and they are saying now that they will boycott all these types of trials rather than just the ones that are juryless. So any man who is not convicted, is prosecuted or charged with the R of a woman will have no day in court at the moment, because all the lawyers are saying no, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do this trial until the juryless trial system is abandoned, and that will be another U-turn. To do that, there'll be another U-turn by the SNP, having already banded the DRS. Now they're going to have to abandon this juryless trial option. So that is probably something that they will resist. So it's all up in the air at the moment. There's a lot of sort of toing and froing. People are throwing their toys out of the pram, but the lawyers have it right, because you do need justice. You need to have a gap. There has to be that distance between the decision of whether someone's innocent or guilty and the establishment pushing for a higher rate of conviction on the specific crime, because they're embarrassed by how bad the prosecution is. So we'll take a look at this very briefly. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but we will just take a look to see what's happening and to see why they are up in arms about it. And of course, quite right too. Anyway, here goes. So lawyers plan to boycott all R trials if SNP goes ahead with its proposals for juryless trials. The Scottish Government's plans to pilot juryless R trials have come under massive fire, with all the lawyers in Scotland planning to boycott them due to concern it damages the accused human right. And this is one of the things that they're saying. It's just against all sense. There's no basis in any law. It doesn't happen in any other country that you can have this, because every other country knows that the jury system is the best system. Now they're saying, the Labour and the government are saying, yes, but the conviction rate for this particular crime is very low. And I would say that's because you aren't doing your job properly. The prosecutors aren't making the case. And that's the job of the prosecution. It's not up to the courts to do the prosecution's job. The court is there to be the judge, if you will, on whether the prosecution has made the case tight enough that a conviction is the correct form of ending for this trial. If the prosecution aren't very good at their job, that's not an issue for the court. That is an issue for the prosecution. But now, of course, the lawyers are saying that they're going to boycott all these cases, all the cases of our trials in Scotland. It claims that the plans had been well consulted on, but the legal professionals throughout the country have said the opposite. They basically, when the government said that these plans were consulted, they were consulted. And every lawyer in the country said no, they rejected it. Every single bar association in Scotland rejected it, but the SNP went ahead with it anyway because of their hubris. The government hopes that getting rid of a jury will push up the conviction rates, but leading advocates have blasted them for getting involved in the criminal justice system, which they say should be independent of politics. It's been called undemocratic by some critics and say it may not comply with human rights legislation. And that is the other problem they have. It only takes one person to win a case against the entire juryless trial system, and it comes crashing and burning down, which it needs to. It really is. But they are saying that there's various myths. The government are going to say that, there's all these myths which go on in the jury room. Well, how do they know? Because the only way you know what's going on in the jury room is if you're in there, and you ain't in there. What goes on in the jury room stays in the jury room. It's like Vegas. A blanket boycott on representing alleged ARAs would see cases being delayed, as they are not allowed to represent themselves in court, and so could be a killer blow for the SNP's plans. This is being discussed because lawyers fear that a decision could be taken later to try their client without a jury. Yeah, in other words, it wouldn't be the client's option. It would be the government saying, no, you're going to be tried by a judge. You're not having a jury trial. That's clearly an abuse of power. The Daily Mail reports that solicitors would refuse to represent an accused in the early stages of the court process, and this would leave the trial in limbo and block it from going ahead, because you are not allowed in an R trial to defend yourself. You must go through a solicitor. Ronnie Ranucci, KC, that's him. He looks like Denethor, doesn't he? Anyway, Ronnie Ranucci, KC, who is Vice Dean of the Faculty of Advocates, ruled themselves out of stepping in to replace lawyers. This is because advocates are instructed by solicitors. He told the Daily Mail, the difficulty is that no one at this stage knows how they, the ministers, intend to operate the pilot scheme, which creates the possibility that it may not be apparent at the outset of a case that it will be tried without a jury. So the solicitor could agree to represent them, and an advocate would be instructed, and then it later turns out that they'll be tried without a jury, which cannot be allowed to happen. And the only way of ensuring this did not happen would be to say from the start, we are not going to represent the accused because we don't know for sure if he'll be allocated to a juryless trial later in at a later date. And so what they're saying is, until we know in advance, we're not doing anything. And that then brings all those trials to an absolute halt. And the conviction rate for this crime goes through the floor. And so what are they going to do? They've got nowhere to go with this. And it's their own stupid fault, because everybody has told the SNP government the whole way through it's a non-starter. It won't work. It will be rejected. And to push ahead with it means you're getting government, the executive, interfering with the judiciary, which never happens in a decent society. The only places where that happens are tin pot dictatorships. But hey, this is the SNP. They'd love to be in charge of a tin pot dictatorship. I'm coming up. There is a reason why so many countries around the world do not have this policy of juryless trials. And the reason is because you do not want the judiciary to be controlled by the executive. It's all to do with the three pillars of power in a country. I mean, they're all part of the establishment. We get that. But by having the judiciary independent from the executive means there can be no politicisation of justice. That's not what the SNP are doing. No other country does it. They want it. And they want it because they are ashamed of how bad their record is on prosecuting this crime. But it isn't just them. It's everywhere around the world, because it is such a hard crime to prove. Now, in some cases, it's quite obvious and it's definite and it happens. But there are a lot of difficult ways of proceeding with this. You have a lot of it is he said, she said. And so it's, there's no evidence. There may be no evidence whatsoever. It's all allegation without proof. This is a problem. I'm not saying and defending the people that do it. If they're guilty of doing it, they need to be tried. They need to go to prison. But proving it is so very difficult. And that is what the problem is. It's a crime that's hard to prove. Not all the time. Sometimes it's easy to prove. But sometimes it's very hard to prove. And that is where the problem is. But that is not an issue for the executive. That is an issue for the judiciary. That is an issue specifically, as I've said, for the prosecution. To have a government, the executive branch of the government, interfering in justice. Now they're saying they're just doing it in this one particular case, but that puts a wedge in there, and then they'll do it in this case and this case, and it spreads. And it spreads to such a point that the executive will be just basically trying people that they don't like. It becomes political mock trials. People go to prison because the First Minister doesn't like someone. And that's where it's heading with this. And so it must be resisted at every stage. And thankfully, the lawyers are resisting it in the very first stage. And so I give all strength to them. And let's get this law utterly reviled law, utterly refuted and removed from policy. It's just got to go. Anyway, I shall stop there. Thank you very much for listening. If you like what you've seen here on the channel, please hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, leave a like, leave a comment, please share the video. And until next time, stay safe, stay well, and always trust the legal system, even when it's terribly, terribly broken, because it's better than the executive. Thanks and bye.